Okay, today I'm going to give a lecture on physiological psychology. Physiological sounds kind of like physical to me. And so when I talk about physiological psychology, I'm going to talk about this idea again that my body's just a vehicle for my soul, and I'm trapped inside of my body. And so I might as well learn something about this vehicle I'm trapped in because I can't get out of it. And it also affects my mind. Later on, I'll get into this idea of psychosomatic. My mind, psyche, affects my body, soma, or somatic. Anyway, here we go. The nervous system. This is what I'm doing today. That's part one of physiological. And then part two is going to be these two. The brain, which, is kind of a bigger part to talk about. The endocrine system, which is about our hormones. You're an electrical machine. It's not just some weird acid trip that Tim had, you know what I mean? You work on electricity. That's why I'm talking to you right now. I can control my body. It's electrochemical reactions that are sent through the wires, which we call nerves in our body, and here's the wires. I have this Alex Gray painting here again, but here's a real nervous system, and I think you can see this system of wires that we have that run through our body that conduct this electricity. Nervous system, two parts. The central nervous system, which is the center, is the brain and the spinal cord. Okay, and so I'm going to say the spinal cord is kind of like the highway that leads home, and the brain is home. Okay, so those are the two first features, but that's not a big deal for the test. I'm going to come give a whole nother lecture on this piece right here today. Is that some of the highways or roads that we have in our nervous system lead back towards our brain. Like if I'm seeing something with my eyes, it sends the information back towards my brain, and if it goes back towards my brain, we call it afferent. I'm mispronouncing it on purpose. It's afferent, but you'll see why I say this. So like with a computer, if I punch on a mouse or type on the keyboard, it sends electrical signals back to the CPU, central processing unit. Okay, and so I have the other direction too. As I move around the room, which I don't move a whole lot when I'm giving, video lectures, that's my problem. I don't get to run around the classroom. There are other pathways that go out to my body, like when I move my foot or my arm, just like if I sent a signal out to the printer. Efferent, and that's why I mispronounce it. E goes away, A comes in. So all I've taught you so far is you have electrical wires in your body called nerves, and some come to your brain up through the spinal cord, which is the highway home, and some come from home all the way out to my body as I control my body. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so here we go again. Here's home. Here's the highway home. But you notice there's all these little side roads. And that's what I'm really going to give the lecture on today is all these little side roads, which is the peripheral nervous system. I got two pen happy there. But center in the center, periphery, that's like my peripheral vision out here. You can't really see what I'm doing. But these side roads, just like I don't just drive on the 101, I might get off on Shea Boulevard or I might go all the way down, you know what I mean, further down to whatever, McDonald, or, go all the way down into Tempe and get off, on a different road. But all these roads would feed into the 101 and come back home. Now, some of the roads that lead, to our body, we have control over. Like I can control my little pen, which I can't show it to you, maybe you're seeing it now, but I can like use my mouth. There's certain things on my car I can control. So soma, I used this word earlier, psychosomatic. Somatic means body, so I control my body. But then there's other things, like I'm not like tripping out going, oh shit, I forgot to make my heart beat, but my mind is controlling my heartbeat, you know what I mean? But it's automatic, and so automatic is involuntary. So I just go, well, that looks like automatic. Autonomic, automatic, this one, soma, I have to control it. So there's two different features, especially about the information that goes out to our body, and how I can control that. Okay, so in the autonomic division, let me get some of this writing off of here. There is two different divisions I'll talk about the whole semester. One of the divisions that's involuntary is kind of like an adrenaline rush. It's the sympathetic division. Whenever we're really excited, we don't have to go, oh my God, I see a bear in the woods. I better start freaking out. Like one day I saw a mountain lion because I was sticking my head into a cave like a dope, and a mountain lion jumped out. I was like, oh snap. You know what I mean? I didn't have to tell my body to energize itself. It just did it. The other division, parasympathetic, calms you down. Sorry, this is down here. Let me check so you can see on this one better. The sympathetic division energizes you. Like when I saw the mountain lion, I don't have to make my eyes dilate or my breathing go faster or my heart race a million miles an hour. It just does it. Why? Because that's fight or flight. I don't want to get into Walter Cannon right now, but it energizes me. The adrenaline rush helps to keep me alive from the evolutionary perspective, but I can't be jacked up all the time. But I do like getting turned up. You know what I mean? But parasympathetic is the opposite. This is rest and digest if I can keep, my pen constant over here. And so I don't have to make myself tired. A lot of times that just starts to happen. You know what I mean? Like after Thanksgiving dinner, you don't have to force that. It just starts happening because your body does it to you. Okay, I'll get into this division though over and over because in the middle is the middle path. There's the yin and the yang to our nervous system. We're jazzed up or we're really, really calmed down and we want to be somewhere in the middle because I'm about energy. I think I gave that, talk on. Okay, so back to the nervous system. When I look at the nerves, this is the most microscopic what Tim will get for this class. When I look at the nerves, they're made up of neurons. Neuron is just a fancy word for a nerve cell. So I think I have it down here. If I put a bunch of neurons together, I get a chain. See these little cutesy things I made in a row? And a bunch of neurons make a nerve. The chain is the nerve. The links are the neuron. Okay, hopefully that made sense. If I was in class, I think I could do a better job. But let me move. Okay, so there's three types of these neurons or nerve cells. Some of the nerve cells are detectors. They detect things. Okay, so sensory neurons detect, let's say, heat, and it sends it back to the brain. If it's sending it back to the brain, it's an afferent message, right? Because it's coming in, coming home. And then it goes back towards the brain, but it's like if I put a flame on my hand, I don't need to wait until it gets all the way to my head. That's why we have a spinal cord, because part of the 101 will send a reflexive, thing back out to my body. And the interneuron, as far as the test goes, you don't need to know this. It's just in between two neurons. Okay, because if you have a chain, there's a lot of links in between the end one and the beginning one. So motor neurons are always efferent because they're always controlling our muscles. Now, in this case, I have a reflex. I didn't think about it. My hand just like jerks off the flame real quick because it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? But in other cases, I have more conscious control over my motor neurons. And so again, these are efferent motor neurons, and sensory neurons here are always afferent because they're always coming back home. We're detecting with our eyes, we're detecting with our ears or our tongue or our skin. Things are sending back home. So all in one picture, so I can recap this. If I put my hand on the flame, an afferent message is going up this sensory neuron right here. Wish I would have picked a different color pen. And then it'll eventually get up to my brain. It would eventually go this way because it would have to go up the highway home because my hand would hurt, right? But before my hand even starts hurting, if I pick the pen better this time, it goes right here to the little muscle in my hand. It's like, just jerk off the flame. And it's like, if you think about this in this way, I don't know if anybody's athletes or if you had to go and have those like a little electrical things put on your muscle and it muscle twitchers. Like one time I went to the chiropractor and they put it on my back. I told them to turn it up because I liked it, but then it hurt so bad it gave me a Charlie horse. But anyway, your muscles work on electricity, right? And so hopefully I've made sense with this part of the lecture. The rest of the lecture is going to be on the 7 parts of the neuron. So for the test, know these 7 things. Now, diagram over here, this is the front end of the neuron and this is the back half of it. So if I put a match over here, that's the receiving end over here. Now these little things that look like tree branches are part 1 and they're called dendrites. Dendrite does come from the word for branch. And so these branches, I think of them, I should do this way, like little fingers grabbing out. I keep thinking y'all are seeing me. And they're grabbing out for information. So dendrites receive information and send it on. Okay, part 2. Part 2 is this little circle piece. Maybe I can erase these arrows real quick. Okay, this little circle piece right here, I'm going to say you don't have to know for the test. It's the soma or cell body. But there's all kinds of things that go on inside of there. I don't know if you had to know all that stuff like about mitochondria and cytoplasm and the Krebs cycle and RNA and DNA and all this other bullshit from your cell biology class, but I'm not going to teach all that. So I'm just going to say you don't need to know this for the test. So now there's only 6 parts that you need to know for the test. Okay. The most crucial part to me is part number 3, which is this long part I call the wire. I call it the most crucial part because that's where the electricity goes down. And so the axon, part 3, is where all the action is going to happen that I'll talk about on subsequent slides. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, but it's the wire that carries the electrical impulse. Now, if you notice on the outside of the wire, though, there's these 3 little weird things right here. I don't know if you can see these 3 things. Those 3 things right there are called the myelin sheath. And if you think about a sheath for a knife, it's a covering. And so these little coverings protect the wire, just like a piece of insulation goes around most electrical cords. It's just not a raw wire. And so if you know about this one disorder, people who have MS, multiple sclerosis, they have a problem with their myelin sheath and it's starting to deteriorate, that part right down in there, and that's why it screws with the transmission of the electrical signal. I hope that made sense. Okay, so that's just the protective insulation on the outside of the wire. And then the last part on this slide, at least, we're up to part 5, are these little weird things. I wish I could blow them up. They kind of look like doorknobs right here, these little things right here. And that's at the end. And terminal is a fancy word for end. It terminates end buttons. And this says synaptic knobs on here. Okay, so knobs or buttons is what I'm going to call them. Terminal just means at the end. Synapse is part number 6, so it's at the end or by part number 6. Whatever, you take your pick. 6 on one hand, half a dozen on the other. But anyway, these buttons at the end go into a lot of detail on the next slide, as well as the axon. This electrical impulse, it's not some kind of fairy tale that Tim came up with. It's biology. It's called science. It's an actual electrochemical reaction. The chemicals have like charges, positive or negative, like ions. And these chemicals work together to produce the electrical charge. Now, the electrical charge, as far as the test goes, is on or off, 0 or 1, just like, electrical equipment. Now, if I wanted to go off on computers, that's called a bit. It either is on or off. It's not halfway on, 0.5 or 0.6. It's either like a light switch. You turned it on or off. So your neurons either fire or don't fire. So you're a binary creature, whether or not you believe this. And to fire, you have to meet the threshold of excitation. Well, what's all this gobbledygook and talk I'm talking about? Well, it means like the flame had to be hot enough, for instance. Otherwise, you wouldn't detect it. It wouldn't flip over, right? Or I think you have it on here, you can barely see it, sneezing is an example. You know when you kind of need to sneeze, but you can't sneeze? It's been happening to me a lot lately. It's because you haven't met the threshold, got enough information for that thing to click over to on. And so that's the way I think of a neuron firing. When it detects enough heat, enough odor, enough visual information, whatever it is, then it clicks over. But if the light's too dim, your eyes aren't going to, detect that. Okay, we'll get into detection next time. But anyway, I have a movie on the next slide that's going to try to explain it, but please don't worry about the movie. I'm not going to ask you anything about this little video clip that's about 2 minutes long.
The action potential, represented here as a bright light, originates from the axon hillock on the cell body. Once initiated, the action potential travels unchanged all the way from the axon hillock to the axon terminals. Events responsible for this all-or-none propagation of the action potential occur along its membrane. Here, in a cross-section of the axon membrane, we see the movement of sodium ions, shown as yellow spheres, into the cell as the action potential travels down the axon. As the action potential moves along the axon, brief changes in voltage across the membrane cause sodium channels, which are embedded in the axon, to open. Positive charged sodium ions then move from the outside to the inside of the cell. The positive sodium ions move inside the cell because they are attracted by its negative charge. After the action potential passes, the sodium channels close.
Okay, if none of that made sense, it is kind of confusing, but here's the way I explain it. We have this wire, which is called the axon, and inside of the wire are these things called anions that are negatively charged. There's a lot more of those. This picture is not very good on the inside than the outside, but you can really see, like gangbusters, there's a lot of sodium. Sodium has a positive, valence. That you have sodium in your body is like no mystery. Okay, so what happens? If you receive enough information, like sneezing, then the sodium pumps open up and it sends the sodium inside, and since it's real positive, see, normally the inside of your cell is negative because of these anions. I should have done it this way. These anions over here are negative, and if there's a lot of negative charge in here, once that negative attracts positive or positive attracts negative, like a magnet, cathode, anode, makes a spark, and that's when you sneeze right here. But after you sneeze, you don't keep sneezing over and over and over. It has to reload in a way, right? And so you have to get enough information again to open enough of those pumps where when all that positive information rushes in and meets the negative, cold front, warm front, whatever you want to call it, that's where you get your spark scientifically. It's the chemicals that have these valences that are clashing together causing the sparks. Now, I worked on it for a minute. If I have here's the wire right here, right? If I take this little cross section of the wire and blow it up right here, make this big thing and two draw happy there. On the inside of it has a lot of negative. Those are the anions. On the outside, let's just say that's sodium. And if I got a hot enough flame over here, bam, enough sodium is rushing in here, here, and here, and it's pushing it all the way down the length of that wire, just like domino. Me saying this, look at this little representation right here. Bam, they rush in. Bam, they rush in. Bam, they rush in. It's getting restored by the potassium, but I'm not going to ask you that. But in your biology classes, especially if you're a nursing student, you would go into. So back to this idea. I kind of mistaught it a little bit. It looks like these touch right here. I made it like links in a chain, right? Look at it under a microscope, then right here, the end button, terminal button, it doesn't really touch the dendrite of the next guy. There's this little gap right in here. So I have it represented. Here's neuron 1. It doesn't touch neuron 2 like a chain. So the part 6 is the gap between two neurons, which is called the synapse. And so As the spark goes down to the end, the terminal, it doesn't just jump the gap. It's stuck there. And what it does is it releases these chemicals. And then the chemicals jump the gap. And if enough chemicals are received by this guy, dendrites, then he sneezes too. And so now the spark is propagated down to the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. And that's how it happens all the way down the chain. Okay, so I'll come back to this. And so part 7 are those little green dots, which are the gap jumpers. Okay, the spark gets to the end, and then these chemicals that get released carry the message to the next neuron. Thus the term neuron transmitters. They have a lock and key fit. So sometimes I call them keys too. I'll get into this in another lecture, but we'll talk about the nature of the keys because there might be a lot of chain links sitting around. You don't want to just activate all of them. But anyway, as this one releases its keys, if enough of these keys come over here and fit into like keyholes, then all of a sudden this next guy, he will fire and that will send the message on, so on and so forth. Here's the gap right here. You can see the keys are jumping the gap, fitting into these keyholes. And so now this one goes to the next one, goes to the next one. Now I think I have one more video I'm going to show about this. These are the terminal buttons right here.
When an action potential reaches the axon terminals, neurotransmitter molecules are released. This is a representation of a cholinergic synapse. Cholinergic synapses use the neurotransmitter acetylcholine, which is abbreviated as ACH. In this cross-section of a synapse, we can see the 3 components of a typical synapse. They are the axon terminal, the synaptic cleft, and the receiving or postsynaptic cell. Within the axon terminal are many tiny packets called synaptic vesicles that store and release the neurotransmitter. On the receiving or postsynaptic cell are receptor molecules. In a cholinergic synapse, an action potential causes the release of ACH, which crosses the cleft and attaches to binding sites on the surface of the receptor molecules. The receptors open, allowing sodium ions to enter the postsynaptic cell, causing postsynaptic potentials. ACH molecules are inactivated by the molecule acetylcholinesterase, which is abbreviated as ACHE.
Okay, if you didn't understand everything in the movie, that's okay. But when the spark gets to the end, it releases the keys. And the keys are what are opening up the sodium pumps here. And then sodium, if enough sodium rushes in, you sneeze. But if not enough rushes in, you get that sensation of I need to sneeze, but I can't. And so it's got to be 0 or 1, right? For it to fire. Now, you have all kinds of keys that can jump the gap. You don't need to know these for the test. But if I was going to pick on one, I would pick on serotonin because that's what antidepressants work on, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but we can get to that on another test. This is why I teach this stuff, so that I can later on talk scientifically about your thoughts, feelings. Okay, so most messages I teach like this. This guy fires, so on and so forth, just like dominoes. I teach it like that. But sometimes with neurotransmitters, if I can get this one to come on here, like GABA, G-A-B-A, I just showed it. When it gets released, it tells the next neuron, don't fire. Because some messages you want to block or deaden or, up or down or this kind of stuff. So I'll get into that in more detail on another. Now, just to recap, all I've taught you is this. You have a nervous system that's made out of nerves, and nerves conduct electricity. You don't have to understand the chemical, underpinning, but there is. Now, some of the electricity comes back towards my brain, afferent, and some goes out towards my body, efferent. And some of that efferent information I control. Somatic, I'm putting my hands up here. But other things like my heartbeat, I'm not controlling right now. So autonomic. And we did learn about the parasympathetic, sympathetic, right? Fight or flight stuff. Now, besides that, if I blew up a nerve, it's made out of neurons and have 7 parts. So look back through those 7 parts, but it really 6 because I said you didn't have to know the soma. That's everything I've done so far. Let me see what I have on here. This is the point I was going to make. Everything your whole life, your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors. I don't know why I had to write this out here, but all these 3 things are happening right here in the gap. They're all happening in the gap. Every drug you take, when you drink a beer, when you go on a run, when you level up on a video game, it's happening right there. And so this is why I like to teach you. Go down to this microscopic level and then come back up to a macroscopic level when we talk about people. Okay, one more little movie, I promise, and then I'll come back to wrap things up. That's the axon. There's the sodium. You can see it's now not like dominoes, it's like a sine wave. Now as it's going through your body, I wish this was in 4K. Jumps the gap. The keys are in red this time, and the sodium is in blue. But you can see the little red keys right here opening up. I guess maybe it'll stay on the same place. You're gonna come and open up. Yeah, right about the same place. Yeah, good. Right there, they're opening up those sodium pumps, and that's what's letting all that sodium rush in. One last thing that I want to mention. Remember I told you the chain's completely not accurate because there's gaps or breaks in here. The breaks or gaps are called synapses. Well, the other thing that I didn't mention, when you get to the end of one, let's say neuron, there might be 2 guys right here. And if I only send out, one kind of key fits every single neuron in my body, I only have one kind of neurotransmitter, every time one of them fires, all of them fire. I would have a seizure. So I need specificity of function. Just like if I reach into my pocket and got my keys out, I would have a car key, a house key, an office key, and they don't open the other ones. Okay, so maybe it opens up this route if it's acetylcholine, and then it goes to this route and this route over here. And dopamine is a different kind of key I have on my keychain, and GABA a different one. And so I have all these different keys that'll open up different functionality within my body. Okay, I hope that makes sense, but if you really look at a picture of the nervous system, it's not nice and neat and linear like this. This is an actual picture. Okay, and so now you see all the dendrites reaching out. You see the cell bodies right in here. These are cell bodies here, here. And then the dendrites are all those things grabbing out. And then the axons too, you can see like right here. If you think about our universe, one of the theories about the universe, it's called the cosmic web. I'll get into it later, but you already know I'm a trippy kind of a guy. If you pan way out from the Milky Way, there's a lot of Milky Ways you put together, and it looks like this, and this is what the universe looks like way from a distance. And I say, well, but that's just like our nervous system. And so the universe is really the nervous system of God, and you have all these interconnections. It's weird. I call it the God fractal. I don't know if you like that idea, but I love it. Okay, that's everything for today. I will see y'all next time for part 2 on physiological psychology.